Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Nantucket Historical Commission. I'm Hillary Hedges-Rayport, Chair of the Commission, and we're having a special meeting today to discuss the sewer force main project and just talk a little bit about the routes and what kind of feedback we can provide on some of the surface detailing. I want everybody to know that we're meeting by Zoom because of the soon to be ended state of emergency, and the meeting is being recorded and will be viewable later. So please just remember that anything that you have could be captured on the recording. Don't share your screen. And I'm going to go around and introduce all the commissioners and introduce the guests and just make sure everybody can hear me. So we have Commissioner Clement Durkees. Can you hear us?
I can hear and I'm here. Thank you, Hillary.
Great, thanks. David Silver.
Present. Good morning.
Tom Montgomery.
Present. Good morning.
Tom. Mickey Rowland.
Here.
Great. And Angus McLeod, our Vice Chair.
Good morning, Hillary.
Good morning. And our staff liaison, Holly Backus.
Good morning.
And we're pleased to welcome our guest, David Gray from the Sewer Department.
Good morning. Present.
Hi. Hi, David. David, would you like to introduce your team?
I can do that, yes. Good morning, everyone. With me today, I have the town's OPM for the project, Frank Ayotte from Hazen and Sawyer, and our project design engineer is Ziad Carey from EPG Environmental Group. They will be probably doing 90% of the speaking, but we're ready to go however you would like to, Madam Chair. If you're going to take and want them to just present and then go through questions as the presentation goes through, or do you want to start with a specific topic, or it's however you would like to proceed?
Thanks very much. Yeah, so I think maybe I'll just give a brief introduction to the team about the Historical Commission and some of the goals of the meeting, and then turn it over to you to orient us through the project. So the Historical Commission is an advisory commission. We're an independent commission. We advise the town, different boards, the public on matters relevant to historic resources on Nantucket. We also are responsible for surveying, and we do reviews where there's federal funds involved under the Section 106 or the equivalent state law. It's our role to review and comment on any potential adverse effects or lack of adverse effects on projects. So we very much appreciate your coming to talk to us. We certainly noticed that our guidance on pavement, which has been a topic of a lot of research and study and interest on our part and the part of the community, was included in the specification as Appendix J of a very long document. So thank you for looking at that and considering that. And the main goal of the meeting is to allow our commission and the public to understand the project. It's going through, as you know, really sensitive areas of the downtown, and to give us an opportunity to comment so that when you go ahead with the particular design and execution of the project, you can be aware of some of the special historical considerations in the materials. And with that being said, unless there are any questions specifically about the Historical Commission or our interests, we'd love to just hear about the project and then move to question and answer and comment.
Sure. Why don't I start off? Can I freely share my screen? We developed a short presentation.
Yes.
To walk you through the areas that the surface components that are affected by the installation of the force main, as well as some requested DPW improvements along the route. So let me do that. Okay. Can folks see my screen? Okay, good. Let me see if I can do. Okay. So, bear with me a second. Okay. So as David mentioned, I'm Frank Ayotte. I'm the owner's project manager for this project, overseeing our designer that was selected for this project, which is Environmental Partners. You'll hear from Ziad Carey shortly. And what we're going to present here today is the DPW requested improvements and the surface restoration features along the force main. Before we get into the details of this, we developed a small table here to go over what was requested by DPW based on the 60% review of the documents. And they include sidewalks on C Street, Lily Street, Liberty Street, Winter Street, restoration of the Pleasant Street parking lot, which is Silver Street, I believe, and Atlantic Avenue. Also under consideration is potentially cobbling Winter Street. There's some evidence that there are cobblestones underneath the existing pavement. So we're investigating, it'll be included in the project, but like all the other improvements on this table, they'll be included in what's called bid alternates, which allows the contractor to bid each one of these improvements as we group them together in order of priority. And that way we can see what type of prices we get and make sure that our funding is in line with the prices. We can accept or reject in order of priority any of the bid alternates we get once the project is bid. Also requested by DPW is some crosswalks on Liberty Street, India Street, and Hussey Lane. Some additional drainage work on Lily Street, Liberty, and Atlantic. The bike path for a portion of our force main, the existing bike path is 8 feet wide. We'll be widening that to 10 feet wide because we will, during installation of the force main, be affecting the entire width of the bike path. So DPW requested that we widen that by an extra 2 feet. And also there's a little bit of bituminous concrete pavement restoration. That's the Pleasant Silver Street parking lot. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ziad, who is working on designing these improvements as part of the design contract for the force main. Ziad.
Thanks, Frank. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ziad Carey. I am the design engineer with Environmental Partners Group. I was also involved on the island back in 2018 when the older force main ruptured. So we worked closely with David and Frank on some repairs, and we got selected to design this project. So the alignment is basically, we don't really have a figure on this presentation to show the force main alignment, but the streets that Frank had mentioned in the previous slide, this is basically the alignment when the force main leaves the C Street pump station and then goes right through LC Street step lane, and then takes a right onto Center, left onto Lily, Winter Street, and then Pine Street, Atlantic, Surfside, and then South Shore Road. But the improvements here, and they're kind of preliminary in nature because this was based on a site walk we conducted with the DPW, Frank, and then David and his staff. What the DPW wanted to do here is there's the existing sidewalk outside the sewer pump station on C Street, and they want to connect the sidewalk between where I'm hovering here with the mouseless hydrant and then right up to the next intersection. So basically this would be adding granite curbing and then brick pavers. It goes from this location to number 5 C Street, and it really adds about 67 square yards of sidewalk. The reclaimed granite curbing would be added there, about 120 linear feet of that. And, basically the would match what we have out here. And it just provides sidewalk on this side of the roadway, on the street. On the next slide, please. So on Lily Street, there is an aging tree up here, and what they wanted to do, they wanted to protect it and then reconfigure the sidewalk to protect the roots of the tree, and then maybe expand the granite curbing just around that car. This is a preliminary in nature, and that would keep almost the travel lane about 14 feet from the edge of the curbing to the opposite side of the street, and keeps it reasonable at 14 linear feet. Add the handicap ramps and a crosswalk from this corner to the opposite side. This would involve something about 55 additional linear feet of reclaimed granite curbing and about 3,300 square yards of brick sidewalk. This portion of the roadway here, there is some water ponding, and that would result in icing and tripping hazards. So the intent is to connect the dots, basically expand the granite curbing from this point up here to the little further north on that side, and that would involve about almost 200 linear feet of reclaimed curbing, and connecting the improving the drainage system along this particular alignment to mitigate the icing and the water ponding on this roadway. And then of course with that would be when you do the crosswalk, you do the crosswalk painting or epoxy painting of the crosswalk to establish them and then make them look like actual crosswalks. In this intersection here, Huzzy, Lily, there is there on the left side, you could probably not see the whole thing, but there is a patch of bituminous concrete sidewalk, asphalt sidewalk, not in good shape. And the DPW wanted to make that a handicap accessible. On the opposite side, down here, you would do by the stop sign, you would add a wheelchair ramp and establish a crosswalk to make it again ADA compliant. This is the opposite side of the street on Huzzy. Also, two crosswalk. This curbing would have to be reset to meet the ADA requirements. The brick would be reset, and then here this asphalt patch would be replaced with a brick sidewalk. And here essentially you have two wheelchair ramps on the opposite side. Further down you'd have another two wheelchair ramps as well. This is the expansion also on Lily Street of the drain pipe, where about 250 kind of goes and hand in hand with the drainage improvement and the ponding, ice damming of water in the during the winter. So it basically expanding the pipe, connecting the structures, and then discharging into the what's called here the catch basin on the north side of the page of the picture. So this would involve adding two structures and then drain manholes or catch basins, and then about 250 linear feet of pipeline. Winter Street, Frank touched upon it. So the belief out there that I know it's a short distance, but people believe that there's some cobbles buried below the pavement. So what we're going to do in the contract document would be to remove, excavate, stockpile, and deliver the cobblestones to the DPW where they're stored. They either could be used back here depending on funding, or during this project, or the DPW would come back after we install the sewer force main on the left side where just that car would be on that side of the road. There's a water main that's going below the sidewalk on the right side of the roadway. And then of course we're replacing also the gravity sewer as part of this project as well within the center of the road. So by the time we're complete with the work, the curbing would be, the roadway would be disturbed curb to curb. So we would remove the cobblestones from the limit of work here. And then if the funding becomes available, that cobblestone would be put back as a final treatment on Winter Street. The force main it comes out of Pine Street and then takes where Frank is showing up there. It takes a right turn and then crosses through the town parking lot there in the corner with that sweep in blue. And once it's in there, it's going to be beneath the sidewalk. And the reason behind that, because we have two asbestos concrete water main within the roadway there. And then on the left side, you have this mature aging trees with massive roots. So we didn't want to disturb them. The idea here is to run the fourth main below the sidewalk, but then in doing so, we're going to primarily clip that parking lot, and then that parking lot houses a lot of drainage structures and leaching fields. So we're going to address what we disturb in there. Plus, the idea is to repave and resurface the parking lot to improve upon the current surface right now. With that, also there is some missing granite curbing along Atlantic where the bus stop is, and a couple curb cuts that would need to kind of connect the dots and reestablish the curbing along that stretch. There would be about maybe 50 to 100 linear feet of curbing that would have to be replaced. And then we also replace improving the parking lot, which is about 1,100 square yards of asphalt paving. There's some drainage issues on Atlantic up here, where it shows on the between the red lines. So there are 4 structures that would have to be replaced, and on the left side of the picture, while we replace the structures, you could see there's a patch of sidewalk with asphalt that would have to, the curbing would have to be removed and reset, and the asphalt would be replaced with brick sidewalk, and approximately it's about 50 square yards of sidewalk replacement and within that stretch. And then on Surfside, once we're beyond Maya Comet, the idea here is to put the force main within the bike path. And the current bike path is about 8 feet wide. And the DPW expresses to expand the width of the bike path and make it, instead of putting it back as 8 feet, they wanted to do it 10 feet. And again, of course, by the time we put the 20-inch force main at a 7 or 8 feet depth, there's nothing left of the bike path that would have to rebuild it, and then we would install a 10-foot wide bike path or surface treatment above the force main. And that involves about 318 square yards of additional paving. And then there's some loam and seed restoration, which is almost equivalent to the same quantity, which is about 318 square yards as well. And then this legend, basically, if we go through the sheets further down, the light gray, it's a full depth reclamation. The light pinkish color here is the remove and reset of brick sidewalk, and same thing, yellow on cobblestone. It's just a legend to identify on the drawings that we'll be going over to basically help identify what's being replaced and where. And again, those are the design sheets. So you know, this yellow here on the top in the top portion there tells you what is the treatment. It's easy to follow if you have the legend to be able to identify what's being done and where. And of course, the red brick is the sidewalk replacement, the brick replacement of the sidewalk, and that's really between C Street and I can't really see the corner here. It's North Liberty on the bottom left, and then on the next sheet. Same thing on Winter Street. This identifies basically a replacement of taking out the cobbles and then resetting them within that limit. The red line is where a water main would be going, and that would require removing a stockpiling of the brick pavers. And then once the force main is installed, the curbing would be reset, and the same bricks would be reused in the same location. And then on the bottom of the sheet here identifies the bike path, which is colored in blue, and that bike the bike path would be replaced with a 10-foot wide surface treatment. Again, this is the rest of it on Surfside Road, which is the same as before, as the previous one. And then by the way, on Surfside Road from Atlantic all the way up to Myacomet, the force main would be installed in the gutter on the south side of the street, and that would be, once the force main is replaced, there would be a permanent trench, and then once the work is done, we'd let the pavement settle, would come back and grind it and mill and overlay once the work is complete, and the trench had enough time to go through freeze thaw cycle and settled. And then once it's done, we clean it up and then we finalize it. And the bottom yellow here is the surf side portion where the force main would be installed within the sidewalk, within the bike path. Same thing here on South Shore Road. Basically, we stay in within the roadway, and David has some other plans to install gravity sewer on South Shore Road. So we'd be using if you were going towards the wastewater treatment plant, would be using the right side of the roadway to put in the force main, and the surface treatment would be just simply a permanent trench until the other portions of the work are completed, and he would come back and mill it and overlay it. That's the rest of the South Shore Road. On the project schedule, so we submitted on March 2021. Of course, this project is funded by the SRF program, the Clean Water Trust. So there is a procedure before they need to review the plans and specifications, and they need to provide comments and give the town permission to advertise and therefore permission award. So we submitted to them the 60% design document in March of 2021. And we completed the 75% design as of May 12, 2021. We submitted those to Frank and his company and the town for review, and we're proceeding with the final design. This date, actually on June 4th, it's not realistic, so we changed it on the following schedule, but we're targeting July 15th, 2021 as the final design, completion of the 100% design document. And we're hoping to, there is a bid and advertise window, which is almost about 2 months. We're hoping to be digging in the ground sometimes in October. The latest deadline is October 28th, and this is when you have to have a contractor on board for the SRF portion of this project. But we're hoping to get there on October 1. Latest deadline, the absolute drop dead deadline is October 20th. So we have a little bit of a float. We're hoping if we submit the design document and finalize the design by July of 2021, we have a 2-month window to advertise, award, and then have a contractor ready to go sometimes in October. And
Thank you,
Ziad. I think we have yet to determine what we're going to assign the duration of the project, but we took talking internally because summer conditions and summer restrictions, if you're working about 8 months out of the year, we're thinking this could be about 2.5 to 3 years worth of work, of course, summer excluded.
Thank you, Ziad. At that point, I'd like to turn it over to the commission if they have any questions for the group. Just one item first, that all the materials that we're specifying are approved materials from the DPW that I believe have been vetted with the Historical Commission. And we're reusing existing curbing and brick wherever possible. So the idea is to reutilize all of that existing stockpile that's installed in the ground right now and supplement any of the brick and curving with the proved brick and curving that has been, I guess, specified by the DPW. Okay. Yes, Tom.
Yes, thank you. This past Sunday, Chairman Hillary Rayport, myself, and Mickey Rowland walked this whole project. And when you're on C Street, we walked probably just past the brick sidewalk, and we noticed that there were two driveways that are side by side that have a wooden fence across the street from them. And if we were to put a sidewalk in front of that fence, which is what I thought you were indicating, it would give those people very little room to turn out or into their driveway, and especially with a curb there. And so that's one concern I have. If you want to address that right now, but I have four things I want to bring up.
Yeah, sure. Just in discussing with Rob McNeil at DPW, where that stretch of sidewalk we would be placing on C Street in front of that wooden fence area, the sidewalk would be on public property. Rob had specified only a 1-inch reveal on the curb at that location. Okay. So to be able to gain access into those properties, you're not talking about a 4 or 6-inch curb. So
that's great.
That's kind of, so aesthetically, it'll look like a connected sidewalk.
That answers it. On Lily Street, if we're walking in the direction this goes from C Street, so we're going against the grain, so to speak, down Lily Street. If you go up there, maybe 75 yards, there's a house on the right with a flagstone sidewalk. We talked to the woman there. They're very concerned that that's going to be disturbed. Is that the case? I say flagstone. I don't know if it's flagstone or not, but it's not brick.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
Tom, is that in front of 28 Lily?
Yeah.
That sound about right? Yeah, they just redid that house.
Yeah, they just.
You know, so when we took photos as we were going along, and I could even share some of them, Tom, if you.
Yeah, you did. I'm looking for it. Yeah, here it is right here. It's I don't know what
it's noted here. It says
I can't read this page because it's all so small, but it is on Lily Street, and there is a picture of it and shows the I don't know if it's just Cobblestone or fieldstone or flagstone or whatever it is, but it's not brick and it's not hot top. And it's
Yeah, what I've shown on the screen is a stretch of Lily Street right here, and only in the areas where you see, and I'm not sure which house you're talking to. It's very
right.
This illustration is very hard to read the house numbers.
Right.
Only in the areas that you're talking about that are color coded here will have impacts to the sidewalks, and areas where there's nothing, we're not impacting. Okay.
Okay.
So it's really just in certain spots.
Yep.
What we'd have to see is your particular identification of the area and then kind of match it up to here. So if you could forward me that information, the intent would be, if it is an affected area, the intent would be to replace what's there.
Okay. I don't see it. I don't see it in red, so it looks to me like it's, now that I see it, it's going to remain.
Okay.
Tom, Frank, would it be okay if I shared the document that we put together? It just might give us a little
hold on.
Organization to bring up the things Tom and others are concerned about or just have questions about.
Sure.
Could, Hillary, while you're bringing up some of the items, some of the locations on Lily Street, we will need to, like I said, in the areas on the red, is because the current gravity sewer line that's on Lily Street does not, it's not within the proper road layout as it is now. It actually goes very close to or under a couple of homes on Lily Street. So we will, when we come through with the, actually that water sewer storm drain and the gravity line on Lily, we're going to try to do the alignment to get it off of where it shouldn't be, especially the gravity line. I know this home specifically that Tom's talking about on Lily Street. This is one of the areas before the alignment is wrong, which is we're talking down closer to the old Bennett property is where we have an alignment issue.
Okay.
Where this house is here, not so much, but like Frank said, if there's something there that we're planning on returning it to prior to construction, and to the best of our ability. And
There's, like you say, David, there'll be two issues there. You know, you may have a situation underground, and this property would be adjacent to the Bennett's garage. And we're also concerned about any ADA situation because Mickey can speak more to that than I can. But just let me go on here. I don't want to belabor all this. On Liberty Street, where you show the where it meets North Liberty Street and Gardner Street, that section there by the mailbox up Gardner Street. That's a very, very narrow area. And if the curb was low, again, like they were going to do on C Street, I could see that. But I personally, I live on North Liberty Street and I go by there 20 times a day. I've actually been in an accident right there where they're going to put that handicapped ramp, handicapped access across the street. And they put a stop sign there for that reason. But when somebody comes around from, what the heck is the name of the street? Hussey Street, and makes a sharp right turn, or is coming down from Gardner Street onto Liberty Street, and eventually either Lily or North Liberty Street, that section there is only one car wide. And so if were a sidewalk and a curbing there, I think that's going to be really narrow unless they make it, like you say, a 1-inch reveal.
Yeah, the reveal in some of these curbing areas, you know, many of these roads are impassable without accessing the sidewalk particularly on some of these two-way lanes. So the curbing will not be a 6-inch reveal curbing, because it would be problematic to even pass a car. So, you know, the curbing reveal is somewhere going to be below 4 inches or so.
That's because most of these streets were designed for a horse and cart.
Exactly.
And on Winter Street, there is some antique curbing, or schist, I believe it is, on the left-hand side where there's going to be a lot of digging because that's where the water main is. And I'm interested in the cobblestones because I don't know if it was you guys or the town that was just doing something else, but they dug a trench there last year.
Yeah.
The full length of Winter Street. And I don't know if that's when they discovered the cobblestones there or not, but
I think so. And that was the DPW installed a drain pipe in the middle of the street.
okay.
So, yeah, that's where that came from, the evidence of some cobbles, and just being mindful of this project. At the very least, we would be removing the cobbles and stockpiling for DPW for a future project. If the cost comes in right on actually finishing the street in Cobblestone for this project, you know, that's a decision we'll make when we get the bids. But at the very least, I think DPW would be, you know, like I said, we would stockpile the cobbles for DPW. We'd restore the road with pavement. And I believe it's the DPW's intent to come back and cobble the area.
And so this is a perfect segue into a question that both Hillary and Mickey and I all had as we walked the whole route, in that in a curbing like the curb on the left, I think the curbing on the right is also antique, but the curbing on the left is definitely very historic and stuff that we would want to save. How is how are the engineers going to assure us that everything fits back like it normally was? I was a finish man. Whenever I took something apart in someone's antique home, I numbered it on the back and it went back exactly as I took it out, so it would all fit properly.
Well, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
So for the removal of this curb, we would number the curb in sequence for the left and right side of the road. It's the only way you can do it. Otherwise, you're stuck with, an odd piece at the end, or you didn't measure properly, and then you're in the mud. So no, so disassembly of the curb will include the numbering of the curb on the left and right hand sides of the street.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Frank. That was my
Um,
exact question to you before, is, making sure that the curbing goes back exactly the way it is. And so I was glad to hear that you would be putting that within your requirements for whoever the contractor would be. That's
Yeah,
important.
it's pretty much a means and methods thing by the contractor, but he'll be directed to do that. The brick is generally stockpiled. It's a smaller, obviously piece that can be fit pretty much, as you take it apart, you can put it back together because it's small enough. But the curbing is a different animal. So.
If I could
Um,
just
can we-
jump in quick, if I could. One other thing that's going to be a requirement that we usually do in many of our jobs, or at least since I've been in charge, is we do pre-construction video and photographs of all areas of construction. And then we come through during the project, we will have an engineer on site the whole time of the project, photographing all the work. And then at the end of the project, we will be able to take the pre-construction and during the construction and post-construction to match everything up. We did that with the C Street renovation project that Frank was the design engineer on. We actually even did 3D video and photographs of that. And that's one thing that's important to me because of, as a local kid anyways, to bring everything back to what it was the best we can. So that will be another piece of our requirements that we will look for from the contract.
Yeah, to add to that, we do have what's called geotechnical monitoring because we are digging trenches next to older homes with some with brick foundation shelving. We do install almost like a nail in the foundation to monitor whether or not there's any movement, and that is along certainly within the historical direct where the homes are. This becomes, pretty critical. So in addition to the construction photos, we will be monitoring the earth in the vicinity of the trench to ensure there's no movement. So, and we
Frank,
have,
sorry, on that topic, I put up this specification page so we can talk just specifically about some of those details, but since you bring up the foundations, how deep do you expect the trenches to be along the route?
Sure.
Like on the narrow Pine Street is densely populated with quite old homes and very narrow streets. So how deep and how wide at full depth will the trenches be?
Sure. Ziad, I'd like you to comment on that just because it varies along the route.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically what we'd like to do is, the force main is the lifeline of everything. If the force main were to be compromised, I don't need to go tell you exactly what goes on, but that, stuff flies all over the place. So we'd like to keep it deeper than existing utilities, right? So if we're replacing water, sewer, drain along the corridor in the alignment, at a minimum, the force main is probably going to be running between 5 to 7 feet deep. Now, along the force main alignment, there's some features like air release valves and blow-off manholes, which requires a certain clearance from surface. So at those locations, you're probably looking at 10 feet deep. If we're in the middle of the road, not a whole lot of utilities, minimum we want to be about 5 to 6 feet below grade. And back to the geotechnical instrumentation and monitoring of foundations, surface features, we go and install these crack gauges to see if there's any lateral or horizontal or vertical displacement of things. And there's a threshold to be monitored by the contractor and would be reviewed by the engineer and the OPM and everybody who's involved. And if we get closer to these thresholds, we either stop the work or would have to come up with a contingency to mitigate any movement. So this would be very closely monitored throughout the work. But generally speaking, I know I went in circles, but generally speaking, I think the depth of the force main is no less than 5 to 6 feet to the top of the pipe.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Some of the details. Let's talk about the detail of the curbing. So we've come to know these curbs over time. We refer to these hand-tooled schist curbs as first-generation curbs. These granite curbs as that you see here on the left and on the right as second-generation curbs. And then there's concrete curbing, and there's which we also consider historic because it was the way things were done at a period of time in around the 50s to 70s, and then also contemporary curb, which is from the 80s on up. These older curbs are especially unusual. They're made with steam wedges and other hand tools. And they are not 18 inches deep. So one of the concerns we have is if you look at this specification, this drawing that you have, if you give this to engineers in the field and tell them to put the curb back this way, our concern is that they're just not going to be able to do it because they're going to have an 8 to 10 inch deep curb. And I don't know how deep these granite curbs are, but my guess is that they probably do give you the depth you need. And I just want to point out a couple things that were some of these photos were in our document preservation and maintenance of historic pavement. So you might have had a chance to see it before, but this is what we ended up with here. This picture where you see this new asphalt and the schist curbs just barely peeking out. This is on Fair Street, right around the corner of Judith Chase Lane. So the DPW this is a picture on the left. This is a picture of the sidewalk on Judith Chase Lane before it was lifted and reset. And then this here on the right is the sidewalk. It's not exactly the same place, but it's the same. It's a very short street. So you basically get the idea of what it looks like along the whole length. So you can see there were a lot of bricks that needed to be replaced. I'm not sure why, presumably they were broken. The curbing looks good. I mean, we would have said this sidewalk doesn't need to be replaced. That would have been our view, but it was replaced. And I think you can see the effect of the brick. And then when the work wrapped around the corner to Fair Street, where these very old curbs were. So Judith Chase Lane had these second generation curbs. On Fair Street, they ended up with these curbs just sort of like barely peeking out of the asphalt. And they're in a concrete trench. So how can we adapt this specification so that we have prepared and planned to accommodate the material? We don't want to come into a situation where the intent is to save the material, set it with the correct reveal, but we've created a situation where the people in the field can't actually do that.
Yeah, it's a good question, Hillary. It's actually one of our comments on the 75% design review. So additional notations will be added to the details in area where I want to say historic curbing doesn't match your traditional curbing profile. So
sorry, was that in the document that we saw, or you're saying it's to be added?
It's to be added. So it was
Oh,
one of our,
okay.
it was one of our review comments. So,
Okay.
yeah, so, you know, in areas where you have that historic curbing, that picture on the right, you know, this detail, you know, will be modified to basically allow the installation of the curb in a shallower depth.
Okay.
One of the reasons too, I want to just talk a little bit about why we, you know, as we went through the force main route, why we're only doing spot repairs here and there. And it is really to stay away from redoing the entire sidewalk, because that can open up a whole host of other issues associated with ADA compliance. And, you know, people like the way the rustic sidewalks look. So the less you can disturb, the better. So, you know, in areas where stretches we have to disturb the sidewalk, you know, then it has to be ADA compliant, or you have to seek a waiver. But we're really trying to minimize our impact to the existing sidewalk. So you had mentioned, like on your picture on the left, you know, you didn't know why this sidewalk had to be replaced. You know, our view on something like this is, if we're not impacting it, we're not touching it. So that's kind of the kind of the tact we've taken during the design and routing of the force main.
Okay. Thank you. That's great. And I also just wanted to call out for everybody this detail that you have here. We can hear from other commissioners as well, but I think everybody would say that this looks quite good because it's particularly meant to be pervious. And past specifications of cobblestones have actually intended to be impervious. And you're the stormwater people, so I'm sure you understand why it's better to have it be pervious. So one of the objectives that we have based on the engineering report we shared with you, that was shared with the town and us, was could we do some tests? Is this an opportunity to do some, you know, some intentional tests of the cobblestones? So where you cross Main Street, I'm just finding it. Well, I mean, it must be here.
That's Pleasant Street.
Where you cross Main Street here, and also where you cross North Water Street, you'll have the opportunity to relay these cobbles, and you'll be using a specification that's different from what the rest of the street was laid in. Have you seen this what Stantec wrote in response to the engineering report that was done by the Community Foundation?
So those details were obtained directly from DPW, okay, as the approved details for the cobblestones. And I think that was all based on the Stantec. I think Stantec is maybe even developed the detail.
Yeah, I think they did. Yeah, that's what we took from them, from that report.
Yeah.
So this detail, are you talking about this detail was given to you by Stantec?
It was given
to
to us, DPW, which
DPW.
was,
Oh, okay. So the DPW has then updated and modified their specification.
Correct. Yeah, this is
got it.
using the latest DPW details in what you see in this version of the design drawings.
Okay, great. We didn't know that. So that's terrific that they're being responsive. So maybe it's really a conversation with the DPW, because what we'd like to do is try some different settings, since there's no official specification for cobblestones. Try some different settings and then watch them, you know, for 4 or 5 years and have it really be an experiment. So to the extent that that could be supported in this project, I think that would be really a good thing.
I mean, I think it's a conversation you probably need to have with DPW. You know, we're taking their standards to apply them to the project because these standards, according to them, have been vetted with the different community groups, and they're responsible for the streets. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Holly, have you heard anything from DPW about this new specification?
I have not.
Okay, well, we can follow up with them. Be good, really good to understand it a little bit better since we're seeing it for the first time.
Another key point on that Main Street section that you just had up, Madam Chair, that area was actually completely disturbed in phase one of the sewer repairs back in the early 2000 stretch, 2005, 2006.
Yes,
So that
I'm intimately aware of that actually, David, since I happen to live there.
That layment there was definitely much different than other pieces of Main Street. And I believe, isn't North Water Street fairly more Belgian block in certain areas than it is cobbles as well?
Yeah, it's completely Belgian block, and it's also new. I think it was done in the 80s.
Yeah, I think when they did something, they took and dug it up and they wanted the cobbles back or whatever. I know what you guys don't want to see is something similar to, or maybe you do, is what they did at the Center Street end of Liberty Street, where everything's in a straight row. The cobblestones were laid in straight rows or whatever like that. That's something that I know Frank's team and Ziad's team will be very careful on who we have that will do any kind of cobble work in the areas that we disturb, just because not everyone can do cobblestones. I've seen it firsthand. It's it's a talent all by itself. And so I just wanted to call out that Main Street section, and I'm glad you were aware of it. That was not laid the old timers way, put it that way.
yeah.
No.
That was my
find-
comment, David, and I'm the one that brought that up when we were talking to the select board. It's between the Pacific Bank and the Methodist Church, probably 50 yards up there.
Yes, yep. And that was totally different, and it hasn't set very well over that takes a huge runoff of Main Street and Pine Street, and has created issues for multiple years there. And one thing that I'm lucky, with your commission, I've worked very closely with Mickey over the years. I've worked for many, many years with Tom, so I know how some of the board members think and operate. So that's a luxury that I have that most other directors don't have. So when Tom came up and started with his questions, I already kind of knew where he was going. It's just because we work so closely together over the years. So
Yeah.
David grew up across the street from our house on West Chester Street.
yes, I did.
Hillary, would you mind sharing this document you put together with us, either through David or otherwise?
Yes, I can share the engineering report. There's also a history of the cobblestone roads, which gets at exactly what David is talking about. I mean, what we've been able through our research to put together about the knowledge of cobblestone roads is it was definitely cobblestones were state-of-the-art pavement, and it was only the best pavement for Nantucket in its most prosperous days in the 1840s. But then as the technology came for bituminous concrete, the people who were doing the cobblestone pavement, they moved into the concrete business, and the ability to cobble the roads was lost. The knowledge was lost. The roads became increasingly in disrepair because they kept getting excavated for, as you know, Nantucket was very early in sewering the core downtown, in putting water mains. Those all went under the streets, and so then the cobbles weren't put back correctly, and it was a real headache, to the point where there was a lot of agitation to just get rid of them, and many of them were lost. So I think what you're going to find actually is that there are cobbles not only on Winter Street but also on Pine Street. There are cobbles under Orange Street, I believe. And a lot of the cobbles that were used when the cobblestone was extended in the 80s as part of this, restoration of the historic views down Main Street. They cobbled India Street, they cobbled portions of Broad Street, they extended Straight Wharf. Those were all harvested from other areas underneath the bituminous concrete. But what we found in our research was that it was sort of standard that, you know, there would be a 30 or 40 year period of very, very little maintenance when the road was put back correctly. And that had to do not only with the bedding material, which we've discussed, which had to have the correct amount of adhesion and clay in it, but also drainage, but also the orientation and the selection of the stones. So we'll send you all of that. And I think it's exciting that we might be really getting back to a period where these roads will last 30 years without falling apart, because that recobbling that you referred to back in 2008, 2009, I remember it well, and the road fell apart after about 8 or 9 years, and it was extensively repaired so that it's no longer dangerous last year. But maybe we can talk just about these specific observations. You addressed a lot of them. So this was the walk. This is the walk along the route and pictures that Tom and Mickey and I took and wanted to share. And maybe I'll just go through them quickly. On the left side, this new sidewalk, you said that was all going to be picked up and put back with a 1-inch reveal. And is that because you?
Well, wait a minute, let me just see.
This is across from the station.
No, so that's the existing new sidewalk. That will not have the 1-inch reveal. The 1-inch reveal will be as you go towards the private fence there to the corner of North Water Street. Yeah.
Yes, that's here. See, there's so this picture here is at the corner of North Water Street, and then there's this section where there's no sidewalk.
Right,
and
we'll continue that on. That's right.
Okay, so it will have a low reveal to accommodate the cars pulling out of the driveway.
Correct. Yes, correct.
Okay.
Between those two sidewalks. Yeah.
Okay, and then all of these nice old bricks, they're going to be reused?
Well, that's the intent, provided they don't fall apart during,
So one of the ideas that we had on that topic is, would it be helpful and a good idea to do some sort of a brick study? So right now, as far as I know, and I'm the first to admit I don't know much about what the DPW has specified or how they've specified it. Obviously, has become clear in this conversation.
There's actually 2 bricks that are specified for use on Nantucket, the S&H brick, and the second one, Ziad, do you recall what the second one is that's approved, or David? I forgot, but one's the S&H, similar one we used on C Street Pump Station.
And I know what you're talking about, and the name also escapes me.
Yeah.
But the thing is that there are, like, if you go to the Stiles and Hart website, there are actually many, many different types of brick that you can buy. And I wondered if it would be useful to have a more of an understanding of what is there, and have a consultant that perhaps we could get some access to say, look, this is what Nantucket has, and this is what is likely to be the best match, and get a little bit more specific. Would there be, is it possible to, if we gave you that information, is it possible for you to use it?
I mean, I think when we look at the brick sidewalks, and the colors in that, we would try to match it between the 2 approved bricks. And again, we're being given these specifications directly from DPW to use.
Okay, so maybe we should talk to DPW.
That's what we have to go through, because if you think about it, if we veer away from whatever standards on the DPW and this becomes more of an experiment, it would really run the project into some serious delays. And there's a big, let's face it, there's a big process into approving materials, right? So I guess I would recommend going through the DPW on things like that, because we're taking these standards directly from them, because in our conversations with them, these are the approved standards for the town of Nantucket. And that's what we're operating under.
Okay. So this, as you can see in this picture, this is why we have, does anybody else have concerns about this? I don't want to assume that I'm speaking for the commission.
In regard to the type of brick,
Well, I'm talking about the appearance. Yeah.
yes. I think, you know, if we could explore what the options are, if they're all equal as far as price, you know, are some going to match the non-new bricks better? You know, throughout town, there are various styles, types, finishes of brick, but all of them seem to blend together except for the new brick, which just, you know, just reads as new brick. So we're talking about what's along, well, the lower part of Main Street and maybe Water or Beach Street. But yeah, if there were an option, and also in places where we have brand new curbing and sidewalks on one side of the street, and we're replacing an older version on the other side of the street, preferably we would stockpile that older and put that when it's surrounded by other older or non-new brick, just so that it would better match, so they don't have brand new, clearly new on one side of the street and older on the other.
Yeah, one comment about the brick. We've done a lot of other projects for other communities. Cambridge, Massachusetts comes to mind, where they have some very, very old brick in the Harvard Square area that we've dealt with. You know, some of it is a weathering issue. You know, so you have a lot of brick there that's been exposed to the elements, and you know, is to a certain color. You know, if you were to clean that brick, it would change color. So the idea of sometimes, you know, having new brick in the middle of that will age over time to kind of blend into the existing landscape. It's very tricky. You know, trying to find a product that's already looking weathered might actually have an adverse effect as it continues to weather, okay, and turn darker than maybe the surrounding brick. I've seen that happen. So just some food for thought there.
You know, Frank, those are all really good points. And that's why I've said it's a thought that I had. I know it's a real specialty. I mean, there's been a lot of research into how do you clean brick? How do you maintain historic brick? Different finishes for brick. And I certainly don't assume to pretend that I understand it. But certainly, as Angus pointed out, there is an observed difference and there is a choice. But what I'm hearing you say is that you're taking your cue from the DPW.
Yeah.
You need to specify the approved material for the town. And I know that the DPW has talked to the HDC, so I think we have a little bit of like talking at and past one another into two different people. And maybe that's something, Holly, that you could help with. My suggestion would be that we might find someone who's really an expert in brick and historic brick to evaluate this and work with the DPW to see what they can do. Holly, what do you think about that?
To find an expert that would help with this. I mean, that's a good idea. My whole thing is, you know, and this comes from having direction from the town manager, and I have it always in the back of my head, is about funding. For instance, I know both Frank and Gia has mentioned about these, you know, side projects, like for instance, looking at Winter Street. Winter Street, we understand is cobbled. That would be great to put it back, but that's going to be an added cost. So there's something that I'll be looking into. Hopefully we can apply for CPC fundings. It would be a perfect preservation example for CPC funds. So I'm just, you know, on that end, just concerned on, you know, we find someone who can give us some information on the correct brick from a cost perspective, how all that works. That I'm not privy to. But since, and I mentioned this before, the HDC has given specs to the DPW on exactly this prior to obviously the Historical Commission coming really in full swing of reviewing things. And I think it's going to be imperative for us to make sure, and I that's on my list to do, to track down those approvals, those specs, if you will, for both those curbing replacements in those spots that have happened along Washington Street, and also look at these bricks. I'm not familiar with the two approval brick types, but I need to look into that. But having somebody that knows the difference between all the different historic bricks would be very imperative, I think, for the town.
Okay, well, it sounds maybe like Holly, our commission and the HDC and the DPW should work something out and see if we can advise on this project and do our best.
If I could just jump in just a little. We may be using the guidance and specifications from the DPW. This is not a DPW project. This is our sewer project. And the reason that I chose this route specifically over other routes was the fact that all the sewers in these streets that we will be going down, many were installed in 1917, others in 1920. So the reason that this route was chosen over some other routes that other departments may have wanted us to go was the fact that we were already planning on replacing sewer and water and limited storm drain in some areas as we were going through this whole project. I do note that the slide you have up now shows something that's been a thorn in my side for many years since I've been here, even though I don't deal with stormwater, but that North Water photo that you show there that shows the standing water, they have tried to put that on my plate for numerous years because, for one, I respond, I answer the phone, which I shouldn't sometimes. But that water comes from across the street, right behind that one-way sign that's over on the left there. That's a discharge from their foundation system that pumps right straight out across the sidewalk. We have tried to come up with a solution and a remedy for that. When we come through this area, will we try to install something to capture some of this runoff water? Because it impacts Matt Parker incredibly in the wintertime on 7 C Street Inn. We're going to try to make improvements as we go along this route. The C Street thing itself, right where you have that other photo, Hillary, down at the bottom there at the intersection of North Water. When we do our final survey and layout, we may very well, in fact, find out that that fence is on town property. It may be an
I was
encroachment.
wondering about that. Yeah.
So once the teams finally do the final absolute layout of it, we may find some serious encroachments on some of these areas that may need to be rectified during this process. Again, working with Mickey over the years on the commission and Tom, things tend to grow out on Nantucket over the years, and then when the town tries to come back in and reclaim it, it becomes an issue. But we are going to do everything that we can to make improvements. That puddle at the end of C Street, like I said, has been a thorn in my side since I started in my position. And when we go through there, I hope that not to be there anymore.
Well, the reason I noted it was, we have this question about if we improve the permeability of the subsurface, would these things drain? Because we did find a reference in reporting as we went through archival material about this, the superintendent of streets back in the 40s, talking about how the water drained right through the cobblestones and how great they were for that reason. So even though this isn't beach cobble, it is a cobblestone street. And maybe, with the improvement of a sand bedding, could this puddle not stand here as long? This was when there was a huge rainstorm. So it's a very wet time.
Well, on the
So that,
note,
yeah.
Yeah, so just to add to this a little bit, we've done about 132 geotechnical borings along the alignment, just to basically look at the subsurface conditions. Everywhere besides C Street was dry. Obviously, you didn't have any presence of groundwater, so it's really a function of permeability, is not so much of the brickwork, but the material that surrounds it. And then obviously it's the degree of compaction when you put it in and prepare the subgrades to accept the brickwork. So maybe like you said, this is something that's probably going to take some effort and research, and maybe a few trials to see what works over time. But, obviously for this purpose, we could certainly specify whatever you want us to, for the degree of compaction, whether it achieve 95% below the cobblestones or below the brick, or maybe less than that, to make sure that the water kind of, goes through the subgrade. So, but again, on the flip side, it's, we did not find any water, which is obviously good news. It's, we could, in our Division 2 specification on earthwork, we could, we make recommendations in terms of compaction effort, and bedding based on. And I just looked while we were talking. I looked at the document that was produced, but there's nothing specified in terms of the brick. I think what it says is trying to replace everything in kind. That's what they're looking for.
I see. Yeah, I mean, to the extent that permeability could be an objective, and there could be some experimentation, because these are, we have certain disturbed areas that are just associated with the route. But then if we make some changes, observe them, see what happens, see if it's an improvement, it could be extended as a project in and of itself. The bricks as well, for that project that I showed you on Fair Street, what we saw happen was those bricks in the sidewalk had been set on what we call dirty sand, or it's also called hill sand. And it's a native found material that is a mix of sand and clay, which had been used historically. And all of that was excavated and replaced with the stone dust, which, I think it does raise a question of, I understand you have to specify these things, but, is that sustainable? Is it native? Is it consistent with some of the goals on Nantucket for sustainability? And is it as permeable?
I would say one comment on that is, just to work with the DPW on either, looking through different alternatives, or, bedding requirements. But what we have to use is their approved standards to date.
Okay.
Because we need to have a contractor be able to cost it, and they need to know what they're installing to cost. So it's a labor material type of equation. And, when we asked the DPW for these standards, it was explicitly said to us that these are the ones that are approved for this town. So, and knowing that the approval process can take a long time and go through a bunch of different community groups. So I guess I would recommend consulting with the DPW on that, and we'll use whatever standard they give us, or updated standard for the project.
Great. We did want to comment that your berm treatment we liked a lot. When I say we, I mean Mickey and Tom and I, maybe other people have some thoughts, but it's very different from the Cape Cod berm type that's been used in other places in the new work, like for instance, the bus pullouts on Milestone Road. So I just wanted to mention that. One area, these concrete bollards. So let's talk a little bit about these. This is at the corner of Lily and Center. We'd like to see these bollards stay. They show something about how things have been done over time. I think they're fragile. Some of them are falling apart. I understand, the ones that are really falling apart, I don't think we're asking that they be repaired necessarily. We certainly don't want to create some false sense of history. But the ones that are there that are in good condition, we'd like to see them stay. So that probably
course.
means marking them and instructing that they remain.
Yep, that'll be notated on the drawings.
Okay, thank you. Lily Street. So this stone now, Mrs. Elliott, who lives here, had all of this replaced because she did foundation, or sorry, not replaced, lifted and reset because she did foundation work. This area obviously it's a little bit close, like as you're walking with your back to Center Street, this is a little further down. You can see it's set in concrete, and it's also got a fair amount of variability. So, the notation is remove and reset existing stone sidewalk. So presumably you need to get under here, but David, you said you might be able to move this. So what is, our question is, do you need to lift this or has that changed? And if you need to lift and reset it, there's just going to be a lot of details that the contractor is going to have to understand about concrete, no concrete, the width of the stones, the width of the spaces between the stones. So how do we get a little bit more specific about that so that everybody we have a predictable result?
This is going to be where our pre-construction videos and photos come into play that are used very intensely in some of the planning. This area, we may very well skirt this one section area. I do know that just further down towards the Bennett's, the sewer main, the gravity sewer main that's there now is currently outside the traveled roadway. So that will be brought back into alignment where it needs to be. The one thing that we do now with any sewer replacements that we do, and Tom just experienced this firsthand up at his house on North Liberty Street, is we now run 6-inch laterals to the property line or into the sidewalks for everyone's connection to the main. That serves a couple of purposes. It gives a clean out at the property line for accessibility in a lot of the old homes that don't have clean outs that can clean their lateral if they have root issues or whatever. And it also brings the responsibility onto the town that the town will now own the lateral from the main to the property line. Currently, the regulations, the way they were written, the homeowner was responsible to the center of the main and the street, and they were responsible to dig up the roads, dig up the sidewalks, and all of our projects that are going forward now with replacements brings that responsibility to the town that we now will own the lateral to the property lines, so that homeowners will no longer have to have that extra expense of going into the roadways and road cuts and patches and everything else like that. Again, Tom just experienced very firsthand that water and sewer project that we just did up on North Liberty Street, with how the contractor worked up there. I believe Tom spent probably multiple hours speaking with the crew up there from CC Construction. And I'm very lucky at the contractors and the engineering firms that I have right now working for the town. They're very responsive, they're courteous, and I think Tom even had a couple of discussions with them about things that were seen or not seen or whatever by the contractor that I believe were addressed. So
I wrote a letter to Libby with a copy to Don, Rob, and the owner of CC Construction, telling them that we were very impressed on North Liberty Street with the way you guys did that.
And I'm a very much hands-on kind of director, as you guys have seen. I do a lot of my reports from the field to the select board, and you'll often see me standing near a trench or even in the trench, assisting my staff. It's just me. It's how I'm wired. That's one thing you'll find me on the job more than you won't. That's for sure.
Yeah, so one question about this, or one comment about this stone sidewalk. We're showing this as being impacted on the drawings. And if that's truly impacted to be removed and reset. You know, you point out, you know, there's some concrete, and then it looks like there's some gaps in there. I can't tell if there was concrete under it or not, but we would probably look as a reset in a stone dust to keep the permeability between the I want to say between the stones. Trying to do a mix and match would be problematic of, hey, you know, it had this concrete piece between here, but no concrete here. That's probably unrealistic. So this would probably look to be reset in one or the other,
Frank,
concrete or
I
stone
believe that,
dust.
I believe the right picture was before Mrs. Is it Ellison? Or Elliott?
Elliot,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't
Oh, that
think
was
she
set.
touched, yeah, these two pictures on the right were
Mhm.
not lifted. This around her stoop was.
Okay, and I can't really tell how they set those stones,
They
but
dry laid them.
Yeah,
that's the way we would do it.
yes,
We would dry lay it
yes,
down. Yeah, okay.
yeah.
I
And
have
that
another
would-
photo of that because I just recently did the HDC inspection for this site. So if you want to see it.
Lily Street is very narrow as it is, and this is an extremely narrow section. There's a telephone pole across the street.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's bad.
Thank you for commenting on that, Frank. That was going to be one of my questions for David. When you were saying that when there's a note for remove and reset existing, when we have a situation where it's not meeting ADA or the existing setting in concrete should not be that, it should be dry laid. Is that a call that you make? Because you were mentioning that you take photos, but in this case, we probably wouldn't want to replace it exactly
No.
as you found it, but that's going to be a call in each circumstance.
Correct. And, you know, just, you know, common sense in something like this, the dry lay versus concrete. A dry lay is more of a natural look, more historical through permeability and the rest of it than, say, you know, a concrete seamed stone walkway, which will look more, I want to say, just kind of new and probably not suitable for the area, in my view.
We
But
agree.
yeah, this is something we would work
we would
with,
agree with you.
We don't
with
want to
Mr.
repeat
Rubin.
what's in front of the Thomas
No,
Smith
no,
Street
no, no.
warehouse.
And you don't want to try and do a mix and match of this because
Yeah.
that would be a disaster on an install.
Yeah, no, that what your comments, setting it in stone dust, dry setting it, it's correct in what we would agree with. And we just wanted to point out that this is, you know, this is a level of detail we want you to be aware of so that you can be sure it's reflected in the final document. Here, it doesn't look like there's any, we were just, I mean, we don't want to put more expense and more work on your plate, but just as, and you know, we're the historical commission, not the pedestrian, you know, the BPAC, but I would think you'd want to put a sidewalk here where it's missing. See?
Yeah,
I think it's roughly here.
just a few comments on that. So DPW did walk the route. And I think, I don't
Of
know,
course.
Holly, were you with Rob when you walked the route?
I actually did go on a walk with him and the
Okay.
planning director. Yep, at one point.
And what came of that walk was what we presented in the presentation as kind of the most critical elements that he would like to see as part of this project, because you know, you could do a number of additional improvements on the entire corridor, but some of these improvements that are requested are not funded by the force main. The SRF will not allow funding for paying for items that aren't directly impacted by the force main. So, you know, where do the funds come from? Well, they come from, you know, Chapter 90. Holly mentions, you know, CPC funds perhaps, or, you know, maybe even some existing funding that was already approved by town meeting for sidewalks and storm drainage, right? So the elements that DPW requested here all have funding mechanisms attached to them in an order of priority to be included in this project, but won't be paid for by the force main, won't be paid for by DPW. through these funding mechanisms. We will be putting together a presentation for the select board that will go through these items and along with, where they're being funded from. Our SRF loan, while it seems large, it's a $32 million loan. It doesn't really go very far in a project like this. So I just want to be cognizant of, I know there's
Okay.
probably a bunch of improvements that you could eyeball, along this entire route. I would just consult with the DPW. I think they might have future plans for the area. But this one wasn't identified, this particular one that you talked about here.
Okay, well,
yeah.
our concern is the historic character, but we're also residents of the area, and we might just give the feedback that this might be something that the residents and visitors would appreciate, because it is a street that gets pedestrians use it a lot. It's a major route into town. Okay, so this comment, there are pink spaces throughout. So we now understand that these are areas where you need to disturb, and you will just lift the brick and put it back. Now, presumably, if you have to take curb up, you'll take the curb up intact. You're not going to be cutting through the curb.
That's correct. So it's going to be, obviously it's in whatever lengths it is, it's coming up in full lengths. That's right.
Yeah. So these trees, there are a number, maybe 5 or 6 really large old elms that are the heritage elms that we care so much about on Nantucket. I breezed past the one, this one, where you said you're going to be doing some modification of the sidewalk detail. But can you just talk a little bit about the process for protecting the trees, especially as you're excavating, even in the center of the street, the tree roots are everywhere, the process of involving arborists. I mean, this one, you've got like the tree growing over the curb, what kind of approach, aesthetic and practical approach to getting a sidewalk here? What can we expect? Because that level of detail was not in these 75% plans.
Sure. So I'll speak to a little bit of this and then have Ziad chime in. But in areas like that tree down below on the bottom right, obviously in the vicinity of our force main, we want to stay away from that. And even any reconstruction of the sidewalk in and around it, because it becomes an ADA compliance nightmare on something like that. And also, we probably would need a variance for that. I can point out that in one of our, where we go by the Pleasant Street parking lot, we specifically went through the parking lot and along that gutter line on Pleasant Street to specifically avoid the trees on the other side of that street. And that's kind of what our mindset is as we travel through the route. Now, this particular tree is at the corner of, looks like North Liberty Street, and I don't know what the other road is.
So this is where Lily Street passes North Liberty Street and turns the corner to go up to Liberty/Gardner Street on its way up towards Main Street.
Yeah, I don't believe our force main clips this area of the tree very closely.
Right, this is where Rob's car was parked in that photo.
Okay. So this is the area where we're reconstructing the curb around the tree. This is the tree?
No, I think where you said you were reconstructing is.
No, not that one.
The one we're reconstructing is at the corner. I don't think we're anywhere near this one here, particularly. I think, obviously the roots could expand a little bit because those are just mature, old trees, and I don't really know enough about them, but we specifically, like you said, Frank, we avoided being, the case on Atlantic. We were on the opposite side just to avoid them. And here, I think we're in the middle of the road, so we should not be anywhere near the road system.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is where Ziad was describing. There was actually a sketch with the, a photo of the car there, and then a line sort of drawing the sidewalk around it.
if this was the actual tree that at that corner, so the sidewalk would come around that tree.
Yeah, do you want to show us the drawing? Maybe we should look at that.
I can.
then.
Let me bring up my presentation again.
I have it open if you want me to share mine. It's up to you.
Go ahead, Ziad.
The thing is, when you get around the tree, then you get to the corner where there's a telephone pole and a fire plug. And so it's like, yeah, you want to get access around the tree, but then you've got
Yeah.
more stuff in the way. So does that really help?
But this
Like,
is
does
the
it
one
make
that's
sense?
right?
That's the tree you're talking about right there. I think
Yes.
that's the same one.
Yep.
Here, so we're not even anywhere near. Plus this this curbing and sidewalk expansion or extension certainly would help. And of course, the you know, as you mentioned, I think the curb isn't that deep anyway, so you're really not into the root system either way.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's an issue for us in terms of the installation of force main or gravity store for that matter.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
really just a sidewalk reconstruction, and
Correct.
I guess we'll be able to see what they're planning when we get the drawing.
Yeah,
But it sounds like they're just trying to build the sidewalk out to go around the tree, and it'll be
Correct.
shallow.
correct.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Is this also going to get built out around the telephone pole and the
No.
fire plug?
Oh, well, that telephone pole right there where the cone is, right there. So you're gonna extend that curb all the way out straight and then radius around. Yeah,
Okay.
So this is something where what we've requested is when there are these changes to shapes of sidewalk, that there be a dialogue, that, you know, the schematic be shown to us, that we can have input. It could also go to the HDC. They're super busy. So it might be easier to talk to us. But, you know, Holly, is that something that we could get to happen? Because I think this is a pretty classic example of the process and the request that we made for how these things should get discussed.
Right. But as far as I know, that hasn't, what we see in front of us is what we have right now. I haven't seen anything else further.
yeah.
And again, this is an addition, this is a DPW request in addition to David's project. So there's kind of, as much as their projects are together, they're actually kind of apples and oranges in that regard. So it's, I wouldn't want to hold hostage this project because of this, but these specific details are important. But my understanding is this hasn't even been vetted through, you know, a whole funding process or any plans. But I think when those plans get done, in addition to this particular project, it's important for this commission, or at least, you know, both commissions, or, you know, maybe the CLG together would be a part of that. I agree in that regards wholeheartedly.
This is a specific ask from the DPW. This is not part of our
Right.
project, but this was going to be possibly a bid alternate.
It is a bid alternate. So what a bid alternate is, again, I'll explain that again. We have the base contract for all the sewer work and the affected surface components associated with the sewer work as part of the sewer project, the force main project. And then we have these other elements, which are the DPW elements that come from a separate funding source that we've actually been able to list in order of priorities as bid alternates. It's called a bid alternate as part of the contract. So the contract is able to, okay, bid alt number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those are the order of preferences. And he's able to price each one of those out. And the thing about bid alternates is you have to accept them in order, okay? So, like, you can't you want number 3 without accepting numbers 1 and 2, okay? So that's the importance of the priority listing on those, right? So we have 5 or 6 bid alternates, and as you reject the alternates, you reject the ones that are your least important, so from the bottom up, okay? So bid alternate 1 is going to be your must-have, okay? Bid alternate 2, 3, 4, all in that order of priority, and you can only delete the ones from the bottom up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I think that when we walked that on Sunday, that was one of our hopes, without having the benefit of this meeting and finding out that they are in fact planning to go around that tree. But I walk this corner every night with my wife, and it's more of an aesthetic visual for me than anything else. I would hate to see that come out straight out from that telephone pole to where that blue car is at the moment. There's still plenty of room to extend the curb and the sidewalk around that tree and then dye it back in to where it is right now. I just think it's one of those things like the sidewalk down by the club car and that kind of thing. That's just not completely thought through. It's just a comment I want to make.
Yeah, well, I mean, once again, this is something where there's some design decisions that need to be made, and we're a group that's concerned, rightfully so, with design decisions, and we'd like to speak with the group that's making them so that we can have input. And what I'm hearing is that that group is the DPW. And so we need to find a way to talk to the DPW. And I think we should all note that, you know, Tom is a resident of this immediate area, and the residents are, I presume, there will be some outreach to residents, and it should probably happen pretty soon, since you're getting ready to bid this. And I'm sure Tom and other residents would have an interest in some of these design details.
Yeah, and logically speaking, to get around the tree only to get stopped in your tracks at the telephone pole is like, how helpful is that to the person in a wheelchair? So I think these are details that want to get worked out certainly before. And I understand that there are two different projects. One's DPW and one's sewer, but whoever's doing what, you know, there needs to be a sensitive review of the plans.
Can I share that document again? I'm just going to get that back up, because I think there are a lot of things that we flagged that you all flagged as well. So moving on to this this bit of Liberty Street, you know, again, we had said resolve the awkward crossing for pedestrians, and it looks like the DPW also flagged that, so we can engage with them on some of those details. We wanted you to be aware right here of these concrete gate posts that looks like they're right at where there's going to need to be some work, so that should be flagged. We were curious about this concrete, this driveway apron. It's right here on this large
Marsha
property.
Brock's house. That's Marsha Brock.
Yeah, it's Marsha Fader's house.
That area
But-
is well known to us, and if you look on our plan, you'll see that I raised a concern to install some drainage in this area because of the groundwater that flows on this road all the time. I am I know Marsha very well. We just actually dug up in front of the African Meeting House on York Street the last couple of days. So Marsha and I have been in contact a lot about this area, and this line was also just replaced by a contractor because their sewer line had failed at these couple of homes right here. But I know the apron is what you're referring
Well,
to.
you know, I don't want you to think that this is a specific request. It was an observation as we walk that, you know, if you're paving the whole area, sometimes, you know, here it says restore bituminous concrete driveway here on the other side, and then right across the street, you've got this bituminous concrete driveway right next to this full depth reclamation, and it's not flagged. So on the off chance that it was an oversight and you had intended to specify it, we just wanted to call it out as something that might be a benefit.
I'll note that, and as we proceed with the design, thank you for bringing this up.
Sure thing. And then bigger, I'd like to have a conversation just about this stretch of land. Tom also mentioned it. It is really a problem for Nantucket, this bit, for the people who live in this area, the people who drive. You know, I know it's been made super clear that there's not going to be even targeted undergrounding of wires in this area, which is an area that would really help to have undergrounding of wires. Is there any possibility of an easement, of a widening here? I know we're getting into areas beyond sewer, but I bring it up just because we'd like to help as advocates. You know, the person you need to speak to is Marcia here. She's not here, so we don't want to have a big discussion about her property, but is there anything that we can do to help as advocates, that we can do as far as getting maybe an easement for a wider path?
Yeah, that's outside the scope of really this project. And really should be I think a town issue. I'm not sure what department would actually handle that. As part of the SRF loan, you know, we're required to stay within the right of way and assure that we're not going on any public lands, I mean, private lands. And we've done that. So, I don't know what the process would be. Maybe David, you can shed some light on that, because it does involve private property as you expand, you know, a roadway width.
Yeah, that can be tricky, especially if we end up doing a final survey on this, Frank, and find out that, and it's happened before, the road's not where it's supposed to be, or their hedge is not where it's supposed to be. It can become quite contentious on those pieces and parts. This area I had called out specifically as it's an icing issue in the winter. It's the sidewalk has settled so much there because of the amount of groundwater flow that comes out of not only this home, but the home just up, which I think used to be England's home, just closer to Main Street. And we were hoping to install some drainage structures and some drainage in this area, which might help prevent some of this sidewalk settling that we see there. But we can address, I mean, we can look further into that. That might be more of a question for, you know, Andrew, because I believe, and Holly might be able to help me on this, I think all the roads within the current either core district or whatever are considered county roads. They're not actually town roads, but I think they're county roads.
I
Holly?
believe you're correct that they are county roads. County commissioners have that.
That would be bringing in another another group, basically the selectmen, but the county commissioners.
Yep. But I agree. I think it's important to try to separate what is actually under the purview of this project, under the scope, versus these kind of add-ons, which does make it confusing when you're trying to help, you know, address some of these concerns. But I think we just need to make sure we understand what is something driven for an accessibility perspective, which makes sense. As a planner, I don't disagree having accessibility is important, but obviously being historically sensitive, but also understanding that this sewer force main project is very important. And there is a specific scope that needs to be addressed. So I wouldn't want to hold that up, but put that off as a sidebar to say, hey, that's something to pursue.
Yeah, and it is the sewer force main project, but it also is a project that is improving accessibility in targeted areas. So it's a hybrid project.
Also, when the work is so comprehensive with sidewalks, curbing, streets, it as much as it seems like a distraction to try to pull in another aspect, it also kind of makes sense to tie it all together, since it's all getting disturbed anyway. But
and Angus, that certainly has been an articulated objective of the project. I mean, from the very beginning, when this was presented in September at the select board of last year, you know, they said we're going to try to do what we can to improve accessibility, improve the conditions of the sidewalk. But, you know, I understand, I think we all understand it's complicated. We just wanted to bring it up as probably of all the areas on this route, this area from on Liberty Street, from Hussey to Gardner, is the most congested, narrow, dangerous, inaccessible area. And if there could be some kind of an easement or a widening, it would be really useful. Will this curb here have also a 1-inch reveal? Is there going to be some provision made, assuming that there's not success in negotiating any kind of an easement or widening? Will there be some detail to accommodate driving on the sidewalk?
So the DPW directive was where I think most of the sidewalk along the alignment would have about an inch reveal. I don't think they want to put it back with 4 or 3 or 6 for that matter, because they want people to have the ability to be able to park on these sidewalks. And as you see today with the cases. So that's my recollection. And I think that's how we noting this on the drawings. I don't know, Frank, if you have any other comments on this one.
No, that's pretty much the direction that we're following, knowing that many of these streets are very narrow and people have to drive on sidewalks to get by one another.
So are you saying there's going to be a 1-inch reveal everywhere, or?
Where we disturb the sidewalk and we need to reset it. So in other words, if we're only doing the small squares that you identified early on, those are for the services, and we're not touching the sidewalk, we'd probably put the curb to the same way it was. If we're doing a full block of curb remove and reset and brickwork, then they wanted to have no more than 1-inch reveal.
So like Pine Street, where people are pulling off, and along Liberty Street where there's a bottleneck, those areas would have minimum curb height. Yeah.
How, so all here on Liberty Street, this is light pink.
That's just a localized disturbance of sidewalks. So this would be put back to match adjacent grades, right? So if you have 2 inches on left or right, obviously that's what we'll do. We'll do 2 inches and match existing. But if you have a stretch like to the right of your screen, where all of that block would have to be removed and reset on winter, of course, then he wanted, or they wanted to have 1-inch reveal.
So on the south side of Liberty Street, on the right side, as we're looking at it, even it's a diagonal, that it has a very high curb and slopes up to the houses there. On the opposite side of the street, it's a lower curb. Yeah, the way that was centered on the picture. It's a different thing. It almost looks like in that area, the street wants to come up so that the reveal isn't so high on the south side, and then match a little bit closer on the left side or north side.
I personally, I mean, a 4-inch reveal is a historic curb reveal. So to move all of these curbs, like this is not being patched. This is reconstruction all along Liberty Street and all along Winter Street. Even though it's light pink, it's the full length. I would not want to see. And there's only parking. There's no need to drive on the sidewalks on Liberty Street, and there's parking on one side, and people should not park on the sidewalks. It makes them inaccessible, and it's actually against the rule of the town. I mean, we have a policy that people should not park on the sidewalks, which is not enforced, and it's accepted that people do, but we do have a policy that people should not. It's written, and it makes the sidewalks unpassable. And moreover, on the other side of sidewalk, so the right side of Liberty, nobody is parking on that sidewalk. It's no parking. I
There's just
just,
a
I
really
just
high
agree that we
curb.
should have 1-inch curbs everywhere.
And I think what we'll do is we'll validate that with DPW. Just to make sure that that's still their plan. We'll bring up this concern.
Yeah,
Frank,
I
if-
mean, if you, sorry, go ahead, Holly.
I'm sorry, I just, for what it's worth, I really do agree with Hillary on this, because that would really change the streetscape. And that's the most important thing, is to retain that streetscape. So,
Would agree.
yeah, that would be the point.
One thing we got to be careful with lowering reveals of curbing is water flow.
Drainage. That's right. Drainage.
Yeah, the runoff. And this section of Liberty pitches down towards Winter and the stormwater system that goes all the way over to India. So some areas you're going to want a little bit more than 1 inch, because we
Yep.
can't allow any stormwater to flow under property. So we
Yep.
do have to be careful in some spots.
But we also, from a design standpoint, we also agree with that, because the curb, if anything, provides a buffer. If a pedestrian walking on the sidewalk, and then you have a 3, 4, 5, 6 inch reveal, and somebody's not paying attention, a curb could potentially be the saver, right? I mean, the savior of, otherwise, if you only have an inch reveal, a car could easily move on top of the curb and then, God forbid, hit somebody.
Yeah, I
So
mean, the
that's how-
curbs
that's
really
how we
do
look
serve
at
a purpose. I agree. The curbs serve a purpose. There's a historic way these curbs should look, especially the old curbs. We want people to be able to see them. They're attractive. I think it really should be the exception. Could I hear from some other commissioners if you support this, what I'm saying, or if you have a different viewpoint?
Well, I know that
Mickey?
from the section of Liberty Street we're talking about, from Gardner Street to Winter Street on the south side, as we noted on our walk, the curb gets higher and higher the closer you get to Gardner Street. And it's also, that curb in that one section is made up of 2 or 3 different materials, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, just on the height, thank you, Tom. I saw Mickey had a hand too.
Yeah, thanks, Hillary. I did want to comment about the height of the curves, because, in many of the streets in the island, in these streets in particular, there is parking. The streets are wide enough to park on the street, but because in some cases the curbs are so low, people are concerned about their cars, and they'll actually park on the sidewalk when they really don't need to. And a low curb encourages that. So I think a 4-inch curb is just probably big enough to look historic, but also discourage people from parking on the sidewalk where they really don't need to. So I'm in favor of not putting them down to 1 inch where it's really not necessary.
Yeah, we'll validate that with DPW.
And where
Thank
it's
you.
4 inches on one side, like I don't think you want to have 7 or 8 inches on the
you don't.
other side, like what happens as you get closer to Gardner on the south side of Liberty.
Right.
Exactly my point.
I mean, considering what you just mentioned on the depth of the existing curb, you may not be able to do, you know what I mean, like 8 inches. I mean, if the curb is only 9 inches, you can't really have, 4 would be plenty enough for exposure. 4 or 5, that would be ideal.
Yeah, and you got to be cognizant of the fact that cars do drive up on the sidewalk, or need to, in some of these really congested areas. And a 6-inch curb isn't going to cut it for somebody trying to get by somebody else. It's just the nature of the width of some of these roads.
It
Yeah.
will cut it. The tire.
Yeah, they'll
exactly.
cut right into it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's saying on Liberty Street that people have to drive on the sidewalk on this section of Liberty Street. I mean, the curb needs to be low.
Yeah.
But the standard should be a 4-inch curb to protect the pedestrians on the sidewalk, to preserve the aesthetics of the town, and to manage the stormwater. Curbs need to be curbs.
Yeah.
Except in some situations where we really kind of can't really provide a protected sidewalk area.
Yeah, I would
So
agree.
thanks
We'll
for,
specify that in the next iteration.
Thank you. Winter Street. So all along Liberty, just a special note, the old curbs are here on this north side. The old curbs are here. I get my directions on the, what's that? The top of the picture on Winter, we have old curbs. That's a sensitive area. You can see, I wanted to show you this picture here on the right. These are these old curbs, and we think the homeowner probably had to dig up or do something to the sidewalk here, and it looks like they're actually sitting on top. This is where I just point out the picture because it just emphasized to us how under some investigation of how you really manage these old curbs and how you set them properly in a way that everyone can be happy with functionally, and the way they look is needed. And you all said that was part of your plan. So
We think that they're sitting on concrete. Isn't that right, Hillary? In that particular instance?
but it's also possible that they have, two halves and they're narrower in one part. I don't know. It was clear that they had been lifted and reset, and we weren't really sure how it had been done. And it did look like it's just sitting there, but the only way to know for sure is to investigate it.
Yeah, usually we bed these things in concrete so they don't sink, and then you have a disproportionate height on the curb over time versus the sidewalk, exposing the brick edge, So our detail will take into account the historical, reveal of the existing curbs and how we might modify that detail when we come across situations like this.
Okay.
What Hillary is referring to on Winter Street, that house where this picture was taken in front of was just renovated in the last couple of years. And so it's entirely possible that they've completely redone that sidewalk and the curbs.
Mhm.
Oh, since we're talking about curbs, I forgot to mention, so these concrete curbs, can these be reused?
So they're actual concrete curbs.
Yes,
Probably,
they're cast concrete.
I would probably say it's unlikely. There is a curb replacement that DPW has specified. It's quite an expensive curb. It is made to look historical. But my experience with cast concrete curbing, removal and replacement, it just doesn't hold up. And it's liable to crumble, fracture, or break on the during the removal and replacement process. That's
Can
I
I
agree
ask
with
you?
that.
Yeah, well, you saw it, right? So is this restoration here where you see the concrete curbing, all of this, is that you need to lift this for access for your project, or is that a restoration at the request of the DPW?
yeah, and I think that one is a let me see what side.
No, it has to come off, just because by the
Yeah.
time we put all utilities in place, nothing really would be left off the roadway and then along the curb line either. So that it has to go. And then back to what Frank was saying, this concrete curbing was cast in place, so it really doesn't have specific lengths. And if you're trying to, unless you saw cut it in place and then hopefully able to lift it and not damage it, I'm not sure if there's a way to kind of put it back.
No.
Also,
I'd be honest with you. I think the replacement material that the DPW specs out is a nicer looking curb than some of this concrete, whether, being historical or not. It is a historical looking curb.
Also, most of that concrete curbing, or a great deal of it, is already broken up in 2 and 3 foot pieces anyway. And it's just almost going to be impossible to.
It will be. Yeah. It's not salvageable.
And also to add that concrete curbing, I believe that spec that you're referring to that DPW has is actually what came out of the HDC approval process with the stuff that happened down on Washington Street. And I believe is the same stuff that was
That's
done on
right.
any projects since then. Yep.
So just a little conversation about the theory of so you understand kind of how we approach this and how we think about preservation. The material that is there, we try to maintain in place. And the fact that maybe something nicer by today's standard could be put in doesn't influence the interest in maintaining what is there. That's renovation. So renovation is when you're saying, oh, well, we can do better. We can have this new thing. And you can debate what the right thing to do is, but if you're renovating, you're not preserving. So the curb, I know the HDC did a lot of work to get better looking curb than what was put in some places. And I think what they've chosen is quite nice. And I think it's going to be great in places where there is no curb and we need new curb. They've come up with a really nice spec and spent a lot of time figuring it out. It sounds like, and I'd like to hear from the commission on this, as far as the concrete goes, it wasn't made to last is what we're hearing. And it's just going to be a casualty of some of the work that has to happen. Holly, are you comfortable with that?
From a preservation perspective, I'm sitting here, I wear two hats. If the concrete is not going to be salvageable for this work that is necessary to be done, I think if this was an elective procedure, if you will, then that would be one thing. But this has to be done. I'm sounding from Ziad, in order for the work to be done, it has to be removed. Knowing that this material doesn't last, I don't see how it could be retained and saved and preserved. Understanding, yes, that this type of concrete does represent a certain time frame in our history. If there's an alternative that it has to be replaced with, it should be the spec that was approved. Now I'll say this, maybe there is another alternative. I don't know. But at this juncture, all we have is what we have.
Having just seen what happened on my street in the last 8 weeks, the house across the street, the curb across the street in front of the house across the street was in all cement curbing. And the house next door, the brick house next door, was all cement curbing. And those guys who I very much tried to work with, and as a preservationist, retain that curbing. As hard as they tried, it does not work. And the reason I've made the comments I've made this morning are based on what I saw.
So when you have a situation like that, where there's not a material that can withstand the improvements that are necessary over time, do you replace with like kind? When we're looking at this photo that's up now, if what's in the middle has to go away, do we replace it with like kind? Do we replace it with what's on the right, or replace it with what's on the left? And part of it is aesthetics, budget, and accessibility. I think if concrete wasn't possible to replace with like kind, I think most preservationists would prefer to go with what's on the left of the screen than to the right. But that's just.
Well, I think what it's going to be, Angus, is maybe Frank can tell us, is it this?
I don't know if you have any of that new curb that was specified by you. Is that it? Holly,
This
can you
is what's
comment?
on C Street, the new sidewalk that was put in across from the pump station.
I believe that is it.
Yeah. So that's probably what you're looking at. It's manufactured to look like a granite curb, like more rough hewn.
It's,
Is there a
yeah,
way to get one with a rough top like the sides?
I think this one was investigated quite a bit to come up with this product. You'd have to ask DPW.
That was installed privately by NIR. I don't think that was not a
Which one
town.
was- it looks very
Oh.
similar to what was,
It-
Well,
was
could
a-
we get a picture?
There was a parking lot there before that curb, that
Yeah.
sidewalk. And
I don't know if that's the curb.
Holly, maybe we could get a picture. I mean, anyway, this sounds like something that's a specification that we need to take up with DPW along with the other specifications.
Right,
Right.
right. Because where we're demoing curb that can't be salvaged, we're using the DPW spec.
Okay, well, I would think that they could show it to us. Moving along, Pine Street, I think you're gonna find cobblestones under Pine Street. You might wanna have you done some investigation to see if there are cobblestones under Pine Street?
We did do geotechnical borings. Ziad, did we run across any cobbles on that during the boring process?
No, but you know, the thing about geotechnical borings, you're going with
Yeah.
a drill rig and
Yeah,
the diameter is 1.5 inches, so you could
Yeah.
be technically between two
Yeah.
stones. Or the rig could bounce off of a cobble and then all of a
Sure.
sudden you're in subgrade and then you wouldn't know it. So,
section of Pine Street from Maine to Darling was replaced during the 2008 or 2009 sewer project, or 2015. That's all brand new sewer in that area.
Oh,
Old water, but that was replaced when they did Fair Street and a lot of the other side streets in that area. And when they crossed Main Street, Hillary, that's when they replaced that section of Pine.
and
Okay,
were there cobbles, David?
I don't recall. Some of that was done by pipe bursting because they pulled in an HDPE liner in this area.
Okay. Well, what we can do if we are, obviously going down that street and we encompass cobbles, the intent would be to obviously stockpile them and send them to DPW, so we can notate that.
okay. This is very little sidewalk work happening. Actually, here, let me bump this up. So I guess there's some more sidewalk work along here, but this is what most of the sidewalks and curbs look like along Pine Street. There's first generation curb just in this area right here. Just for your notation about things. We think this looks really nice. Great reveal, beautiful curbing. Everything looks great. So I guess the expectation is that it gets put back just like that.
Yep.
Yeah. I guess I'll also mention, I do hope if there's changes to dimensions along here, if the DPW is thinking about requesting changes to dimension, that we're gonna know about that, Holly. We're looking at this plan, but this plan doesn't have everything that the DPW wants. And like this plan doesn't say anything about a 1-inch reveal curb or, so I guess we just want to make sure that as things change from this plan, we have a chance to comment. I don't think there are any meaningful comments here. We noticed again that I think you're continuing for this to be asphalt, which, it'd be great if it were brick, but that's an expansion of the scope. A couple things to note here. These trees, you can see people have made their own little path here, but there's some important trees here. And if you could mark this concrete bollard, try to get it to stay in place.
yeah, we'll have a notation on all concrete bollards to be, I don't think we touch on this, but if it is to be disturbed, it will be reset in the same location.
Yeah, because this is all coming up and you're going to be putting new brick. So.
Was this
Thank you.
Atlantic Ave? So this is in the
This is the spot that it's pretty much the area where you have those catch basins that need to be fixed, and it's basically flanked by existing brick, and to take that asphalt up and put in brick.
So Frank, I thought we're gonna keep this as bituminous concrete, right, instead of brick. We only replacing the drainage there, I thought.
That's right. So one of the things that DPW requested here on this is only take care of the drainage, and wherever there's missing curb, because there were a few curb cuts there that didn't have curb replacement, put in curb that's missing so that we can pave the street curb to curb, and they can come back and redo the sidewalks.
Okay, because it says here, remove existing bituminous concrete sidewalk and install new brick.
Right,
Which I
right.
assumed was down the whole area.
Right, and that was just before we had a funding meeting on DPW's requested items. So we removed the idea of replacing the bituminous stuff with brick because of funding, and DPW was going to handle that at a later date.
Okay,
Hillary, can I make
yes, of course.
I hate to interrupt, but I'm gonna have to leave shortly. I just wanted to ask a question of the engineers regarding sort of ADA concerns. In places on the sidewalks along the route where you are going to be ripping up the curbs and repairing the sidewalks, there's a number of locations where there's phone poles and hydrants, completely blocking the sidewalk. Are those going to be corrected to create full access there? Can they move the poles? I mean, what happens to the pole when you excavate the full depth of the street around it?
Yeah. The short answer to that is most likely no. Areas where we have poles in place that are immediately adjacent to the excavation will have to be supported and held in place during installation of the force main. Wherever we cannot meet a full ADA compliance, we'll have to request a waiver. And it's strictly because of the nature of some of these age streets.
So the intent is not to move any utility poles.
Right.
And then there's fire hydrants, and you're doing work on the water lines. If they're in the sidewalk, would they get relocated?
So that's a possibility, provided we can land the hydrant on public property. In other words, the easement of the street still allows for the relocation on public property.
And then in just a last similar vein, wherever there's a tree, and we're not going to ask to cut down trees, obviously.
No.
But there, one thing that we've done on the Commission on Disability, where work is being done on either around a tree on a sidewalk, is to ask that the curb be dropped down to the street level to create sort of an informal ramp down to the street, so that you're not creating a dead end for wheelchair users. So, if that could be done around, there aren't that many trees, but the few that you do encounter, to try to drop the curbs to street level so it becomes accessible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was the extent of the comments. I mean, I think you're obviously very keen on the trees and making sure that whatever precautions need to be taken. And we have a tree advisory committee, which Rob chairs. So we'll just emphasize that the historic trees are really important to the town, but we're not telling you anything you don't know there.
Hillary, can I share a couple of pictures of you for C Street? I just happened to find.
Yes.
It might help that if you notice, this is when we had to do a tapping into the force main to plug the force main. If you look behind where the people are standing, that is what C Street used to look like before NIR went in and sidewalked and filled in that whole area. It was that way for the, let me see here. You can see that was all the way for the length of that. It popped out by the telephone pole, then it went back in. That was all done by Nantucket Island Resorts when they took all those buildings down. So they changed that whole streetscape. That was 2008, Frank, 2007, 2008. They changed that
Harbor
streetscape.
House.
It wasn't a town, the Harbor House thing. I know we didn't share that. We didn't do that streetscape issue.
You know who built those?
CC Construction.
No, I meant the part of those Harbor House houses.
Yeah, one of them old local people.
Yep, related to me.
I wonder who.
Possibly related to me too, somehow along the line. 'Cause
One question that I had was just about the catch basins. Do we have so there are going to be more catch basins going in. Is that a detail we might want to look at? It's genuinely a question. I don't know what the answer is.
potentially there may be a few more being added in. I know and Ziad can help me on this one, especially on Atlantic Ave, some of those catch basins there are called curb cut or curb catch basins. Yeah, gutter inlets. Whether we go back with that same style, it will all depend what we find in the ground when we get through there. I don't think we would create any new gutter inlets anywhere. It's going to be your conventional square grate that you see along the roadway.
Okay. That's what I was curious about. Are they going to be like the ones that are in the curb, or are they going to be like the ones that are grates? So I'm hearing that they're mostly going to be the ones that are grates.
Yeah.
I'm just looking through, my questions and notes to just see if there was, does anybody else have any specific questions or comments from the commission?
I just had one. I didn't want to interrupt earlier when the presentation was going on, and we were talking about curbs that that aren't the full 18-inch depth, and where they set, balancing the reveal with the depth necessary to keep them from falling into the street. And so just like what's going to be the driving priority there, so that the sidewalk doesn't push them into the street, but that they aren't, submerged down below and don't have a depth above the street.
Yeah, I think the really old historical curb, I think the reveal on that can handle a 4-inch reveal with setting the lower half of that in a concrete kind of trench. So I don't think we're looking at anything taller than 4 inches on curb like that. And I'd be very surprised if it was higher than that in any areas where that curb exists.
Great. That sounds good. Except for the setting in concrete.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the correct process to do that. Otherwise, what you do get is settling, and you can see it, on island, off island, wherever a contractor does not fully compact around the curbing before installing the concrete, you really get crooked curbing, and you see it everywhere. And that's just poor installation. Okay, so they really need to excavate the trench area along the curb. They really need to put the necessary compaction around it, and then it's the concrete after they set the curb, setting the curb in that concrete trough, so to speak.
So Frank, the detail that's important to us with this old curbing is what you have shown in your specification, which is that it's like a concrete buttress on either side,
Correct.
but it has a gravel bottom. So it's not a bathtub.
Right.
No, so
Correct.
the concrete,
Correct.
yeah, the
Yeah.
curbing would, the typical standard procedure to set granite curbing would be on a stone bed.
Right.
And the high early strength concrete would be placed in front of the curbing and the gutter line to make that curb stable.
Correct.
And that way would allow somebody to come back in the future, remove the curb, and
Right.
reuse it. So, you know, without having to scrape the concrete off of it. But to
Right.
Frank's point, I think a 4-inch reveal, because, you know, what's trying to push the concrete out, I mean, the curbing out in the street is basically however depth of sidewalk on the opposite side to be able to push it tilted the other way. And that's part of the reason the concrete is placed in front of it, so it prevents it from moving.
Right.
I think 4-inch would be more than suitable. You know, 4 to 5-inch exposure would be plenty enough for 8 or 9-inch curb.
Okay. One of the concerns that we had, we had a lot of concerns about concrete because of this reusability issue that you bring up, Ziad. But we also appreciate that, the concrete's important for stability. So what was recommended to us by the preservation engineer who assessed the situation in Nantucket was that a sacrificial barrier be used. That, the concrete provides the strength and the buttressing, but some kind of a simple sacrificial barrier would prevent adhesion and make it more likely that the curbs could be reused in the future, which is important. What's your thought on that?
I mean, sacrificial barrier could be simply a poly plastic thing, right? So to be able to,
Well,
you know,
or paper. I mean, just paper that would degrade.
Again, this is, I have no problem with that, Frank, but I think something that really has to come from the DPW, I would imagine.
Yeah, think about sacrificial barriers. I hear what you're saying about down the road, if you remove the curb, generally you can take that concrete off the bottom pieces of that curb on the stone. You put a barrier in, it kind of defeats the purpose of the concrete buttress. That's my experience. I guess I would defer to the DPW because we really want to install these curbs with the Nantucket standards, and what they expect. So that would be another question for them if they want to modify that detail. But generally, something like that would kind of defeat the purpose of the adhesion of the concrete to the curb. Somebody hits the curb, then you have that barrier to separate from the curb from the concrete, and that going in from the curb towards the sidewalk, and you don't get that stability. It's a question for the DPW if you're really concerned about it.
And in your experience with, these are schist curbs. Schist can be of different hardness. Our schist curbs are quite hard. It so happens, which is why it's really unusual that we still have them because they're, 200 years old and they are still intact and reusable. But what is your experience with a stone that's not a granite with getting concrete off it?
Well, Zia, do you recall if the concrete being laid in the curb line is more of a flow fill type of concrete? In other words, lower PSI type of concrete?
Yeah, it's usually low strength concrete and high early strength because it dries up pretty quick. It's really nothing but to provide this mass. And then usually when you take off, let's just say even concrete adheres to the curb. And then at some point in the future, you're going to take out the curb to, take it and reset it. And technically, all you're doing is that bottom has to be at the bottom, right? It's not like you really have to go through the extensive effort to break off the concrete and then set that curb. It's done all the time. Usually curbing, it's reset every, 10 to 15 years perhaps. And, they take it and they reset it back in the same spot. So almost 100% is reusable. I haven't really seen anybody doing, as a matter of fact, we're doing a project in Lexington today down the center and they, same like you guys, looking to reuse every bit of curb that they have. And, a lot of that curbing is coming off and just coming back and being reset in the same way. They're not calling for a barrier or anything like that. So it is not a standard thing that I see, but again, I would say DPW would probably have more comments on that.
And usually a lower strength concrete, you don't have a problem trying to remove that from the stronger material, which is going to be your curbing.
Thank you. Well, I think that would address our concern. So, well, the things that I've noted are to look into maybe a more detailed specification for brick, if that's possible. That would be something that we would seek advice from an outside expert and present to the DPW. The desire for detailed design review of additional changes to the shape. Again, that's something that you are expecting to receive from the DPW. So we would ask the DPW to run it by us and get some input on. We talked about the reveal of the curb and have agreement that unless it's specifically noted that it needs to be driven on, that it's really an advantage to have it remain at 4 inches for many reasons. And the hang on one second. And I think there are some other things. I mean, I have notes, so maybe I'll just write it up afterwards, but I just want to express so much appreciation to you three for spending the time, and Holly, thank you for setting it up. Does anyone else, did you have any other questions for us, or anyone else have questions? No? Okay.
I don't have any questions, Hillary, but I do want to make some comments. Working with Holly and your group has been very smooth to this point so far. I mean, we approached Holly well before we even started getting the design plans to ask her comments and her input. It was extremely helpful. And that's why we reached out to your group so soon in this process. I'm very lucky to have Ziad and Frank on board as my engineers, because they have a lot of care and thought in what they do, and it's helped me tremendously. It's been a long time since I've chatted with Tom Montgomery and Mickey. I want to say thank you to everybody on your board as well. We'll do what we do the best we can, and I know people are starting to hate me for digging up all the roads, but I'm trying to keep everyone being able to flush. So.
Yeah, and one comment, this force main is probably one of the most important projects for the town. 70% of the town's wastewater goes through this force main. And everybody saw what happened with the break, during that one winter, and it can really paralyze the entire town. So having some redundancy in another force main for the town to use in this area is going to be a huge benefit to the town. And then we'll look at rehabbing the existing one that's in place. So that's the plan, right, David?
That is the plan. And that was another reason why one of the drivers were why we went this direction. One, we needed to get away from all the truck routes, because we did paralyze downtown when that break happened. To get away from all the National Grid power, that paralyzed us in our repair and all of our mitigation efforts on that. And this was, however, a very historic area we were going through, but it would not impact the whole entire center of the community, like what happened on January 4th, 2018 at 8 o'clock at night. So that was another driver why we went this way. It was an eye opener to see how one incident was able to paralyze the entire downtown. I mean, it was pretty scary to see what had happened. So thank you.
Thank you, David. I just wanted to make a comment for those of you may not be aware, but that C Street pump station, the work that was done on it is fantastic. So much to a point that our Resilient Nantucket design guidelines showcase it. And the consultant who is on the board of the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions and many other preservation organizations is actually showcasing that with other work. So for resiliency. So I just wanted you to know that, Frank. It's
great. Thank you. Thank you.
It's
a great project.
I've been telling David this whole time that it's been, a great thing for an outside, professional to be able to say, hey, Nantucket's already started the work with one of their own structures. So
yeah, great.
So Just in terms of next step, I'm just looking at the timeline that you wanted to have the design finalized by July 15th. And then you're going to advertise it for bid for 2 months. So if we did have comments, I mean, we haven't even seen what's proposed for the small areas where there's some design changes to the width and layout, which are very small areas. But there's that, and then there's the idea that we might comment on the brick, and that we might have, you know, an actual test site with the where the cobblestone is, with the specification. These are all things that are going through the DPW. What kind of timeline? I mean, if we did have some comment on wanting to have a particular brick specified, when do you need to know that? When do you need to? I just want to make sure that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if we kind of run out of time at this point, we could say we can always issue an addenda during the bid process. If you come to some sort of an agreement with the DPW today or within the next few weeks on what to use, we'd be more than happy to incorporate that in the design. I don't think the brick specification is a deal breaker. We could always fit that into the work,
Yeah.
and, you know, whether by addenda or by just a quick modification to the plans and specifications.
Yeah, what we can also do is we can show you that reconstructed sidewalk around that tree in advance of completing the 100%, so you can at least have that discussion with DPW. That's not a heavy lift. The other stuff, you know, can be done through an addendum process. They're not changing fundamentally, you know, how we're going to do this project. You know, different type of brick, you know, cobblestones. It's to be seen whether or not we get a good price to redo Winter Street, but, you know, cobblestones, you know, it's in the install. So
Okay. One last thing that came up when we were walking around. Does it make any sense, or maybe you're already providing for this, things will come up in the field, like, you know, we can't get this bollard, this concrete bollard that we're supposed to save, we can't get it out, you know, something broken, we need to replace a stone, and it's a specialized stone. You know, I know for the archaeological process, there's somebody that you can call, like if the guys dig up a bone, there's a number they call. Does it make sense to have an analog for the preservation stuff?
I mean, I'll defer to David on that. Usually we work directly with the town on this, and this being David's project, you know, anything that we discover in the field through our inspectors, or, you know, as we move this project along through construction, we bring right to David's attention. And you know, there's a process of, you know, the contractor asking questions and getting answers, and there's a time frame to do that, which is never problematic. But I guess, David, maybe you want to comment on how you want to handle, you know, the project from the town's end with you know, all the boards and interested parties.
One thing that one of my biggest faults is I'm very open and outspoken when it comes to a lot of stuff, and I am not afraid to ask questions or bring other either boards, commissions, or whatever in. I won't hide anything. I just, you know, if we come into a situation, we stop. I take and reach out to Libby or whoever I need to reach out to, and we're already working on a solution by the time we're doing that. We did that with C Street. As a prime example, we did that with the force main reconstruction when it broke, with some of the stuff that Ziad and what we found in the ground that was not only surprised us, and we thought we were seeing one thing and we found other things. We stopped, we come up with a solution, and we reached out to whoever we had to. So nobody will be in the blind around here at all. Holly is going to end up hating me at some point in time, because we have kept her in the loop since day one. Anytime you guys ever have a question, any board member has a question, we don't mind people to visit the sites. We do that often with all the different projects. I've been doing a lot of my select board updates on the Surfside project now live from the site. last week was when the water main ruptured, which was unfortunate, but we will keep everyone in the loop the whole time we go along with this. Plus, Tom knows where I live and everyone else, so.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if Holly, I don't know, maybe you could be our designated person to consult with. It sounds like that's already happening, but if there's really a preservation question, something that you feel like, you know what, we should be saving this, but we're having a problem, or you don't know if you should save it, Holly, I think would be the go-to person. Right, Holly?
I agree. And she has been phenomenal at the work, and I know where she lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. David's family and I go way back, so yeah.
Okay.
Definitely not a problem to continue that liaison, not a problem.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate the open communication, the spirit of it all. We all want a great outcome here. The advanced discussion is fantastic in contributing to that outcome. So
You're welcome.
if
you.
if nobody has any other questions, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Angus. All in favor? Yes.
Aye.
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 Let's go get some
Thank
lunch.
you. Thank you all
Okay.
so much.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you,
Great
everybody.
great to see you guys.
Thank
Thank you guys,
you.
appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Aye.
Bye.